this.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have an amazing panel together for everyone tonight. I'm Anna Magnuson. I'm the programs coordinator at the James Beard Foundation. I'm joined by Zoe Adjonyoh, the director of programs Women's Leadership, who will moderate tonight's panel. Some of you may know her as Chef Zoe of Zoe's Gonna Kitchen. Her work in all realms, from the collective Black Book Global to her podcast, Cooking Up Consciousness, serves to decolonize the food industry and center systemically excluded folks.
It's a mouthful, sorry about that.
So let's jump in here. So how the webinar works tonight. So this is being recorded and this will be uploaded to the virtual education library on the James Beard website that everyone will have access to. As we are short for time and there's a lot of content we want to cover tonight and we are a little behind, apologies. We are going to save questions for the end as time permits. So feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A box, but we will answer as much as we can towards the end of the webinar. If you are having technical difficulties, as we did, please put it in the comment box and we'll see what we can do to help you.
Hello, good evening and welcome from Dubai and New York. So, did you do an intro for Brooke and Shenarri, or should I do that?
I'm still going here.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So tonight's discussion will cover the importance of preserving and securing Black foodways, from land justice and policy to food sovereignty. Black farmers are an integral part of preserving Black foodways and battle historic disenfranchisement, ultimately resulting in a small percentage of Black farmers today. Whether you are joining us here as a chef, owner, community member, organizer, we seek to answer, how can all of us support and secure the future of Black farmers? Now I'll introduce our wonderful panelists. So first I have Brooke Bridges, the Food Justice Assistant Manager for Soulfire Farm. Brooke joined Soulfire as an assistant kitchen magician, and soon her role expanded to include being on the farm and running the social media. Outside of Soulfire Farm, Brooke is a homesteading mom of one, creating remedies out of the abundance from the land. Next, we have Shinari Freeman, the executive chef of Cadence, a vegan Southern soul food restaurant in the East Village, New York City. Freeman is a recent graduate of the Institute of Culinary Education, holistic researcher, and a health and wellness advocate who has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, Vogue, New York Magazine, Financial Times, and many more. She was named Rising Chef Star of the Year in 2021 by Esquire. And finally, we have Cornelius Blanding, who should be joining us anytime now. Cornelius is the executive director of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund, where he serves many hats over the last 20 years. The Federation consists of Southern Black farmers, landowners, and cooperatives, and serves the development of self-sufficiency of Black farmers from local to global. With an extensive background in business and project development, Cornelius continues to serve on various boards and committees that also advocate for a dignified food system. So from there, we will jump right into it. I'll pass it to Zoe.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you for all the work you've done putting this together. And to our guest, Shenarri, thank you. Brooke, thank you. I want to preface this by just saying that this is Black History Month. Of course, we who are Black people live in Black history every day. And Black History Month is an opportunity, I thought, to talk about also the future of what Black history is, right? And sometimes the future involves the past, and sometimes it's a combination of those things. I personally feel that as a planet, Black and Indigenous communities, and everyone else will have to follow suit eventually. I do see a return to ancestral foodways. I do see a return to improved health, right? From connecting with ancestral ingredients, and just improvements for the planet and farming by having a better relationship with the soil and the land that we are graced to walk upon. And so we're calling this Black to the Future because we're talking about ancestral foodways, we're talking about Black farming, and we're talking about the relationship between those things and purveyors of Black food. And by that, I mean brilliant restaurants and makers and cooks and chefs like Shinari. So how do we bring all this together, right? So I'm curious to know, between yourselves, like in the work that, Shenarri, tell me about your relationship with Black farms, Black farming. Do you have one? Like what's the cadence at Cadence when it comes to having a relationship with local sustainable farming? And are there any Black farmers in that network that you are in relationship with?
So like my overall goal as a chef, definitely, being in this space, creating like vegan food and vegan soul food, I definitely do seek to have more Black farmers and to get my produce for them. Um, my current issue has been opening the restaurant in the middle of a pandemic. So it's been really hard, working with local farmers, certain purveyors and vendors as things start to kind of pick back up within this new year. So, I've been having some issues within that span of actually finding farmers that can produce enough produce for the restaurant, and finding ways to just kind of bridge that gap. But I think that as New York is opening up a bit more, the world is opening up a bit more, and like we're having less issues with like vending and getting certain products to restaurants. There's like a completely open lane for it. But I think, definitely as a chef, it's important to highlight these things when we're thinking about produce. We're thinking about, shopping local, shopping organic, shopping seasonal. I think that that's something that a lot of chefs and restaurant owners can benefit from. One of the programs we have here at Cadence is like our wine program. So all of our wines are Black owned. We have wines from California, South Africa, France, all sorts of places. So my goal, going into, because we're not even one, so we'll be one March 31st. So, my goal going into the second year with Cadence, I definitely want to figure out a way, how can I get all of my food and my produce to come from strictly Black owned farmers and purveyors.
As a side question, if you don't mind, thank you very much for the detail there. Like farmers markets, right, would seem a normal and natural place for restaurants to, like obviously Union Square in New York. I know a lot of people head down there. But how many Black purveyors of goods and services, like do you see many Black people at farmers markets? Tell me about that. Isn't provide like selling vegetables and fruits and all the good stuff?
Right. So, when I go down to the farmers market, I don't really see that many people that look like me. Or, I have like such a, I don't want to say I'm not limited with what I produce here at Cadence, but I'm not cooking meat, or I'm not cooking like eggs or certain things that may be available with the Black farmers that I come across. But when it comes to like shopping in bulk and just like shopping, I guess like local produce, I don't really see that many Black farmers at the farmers market. However, in my community gardens, which are a little bit smaller, not necessarily on a restaurant level, I do see a lot of Black farmers there. So I go to Phoenix Garden, and every week there's like a local food box from the local farmers and people that actually help and volunteer at those neighborhood gardens. And it's great, but I know there's not enough there to produce, enough produce for what I need at the actual restaurant. But at home, I'm all set. But I would love to, duplicate that over to the restaurant as well.
Thank you. Brooke, Soulfire Farm, a mecca for anyone Black in food, I think, who cares about these kind of things. What's your take on this? Because obviously, the work that you do is at Soulfire Farm, is centered around teaching and learning and advocating for people to have this relationship with land, relationship with where their food comes from and the people that grow it, right? And there's this beautiful mission behind all that. How does that translate in the work that you do in practical sense, and having like specifically at Soulfire Farm, like how are you getting that food to local restaurants and chefs? Are you? And if so, how are you doing it? And what are the limitations, if any?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at Soulfire Farm, our structure of what we produce on the farm has changed a lot over the years. For a while, we had a really large CSA, 100 some odd members, and we were able to bring, a lot of food. Since then, our structure has really shifted to being more focused on the education piece, because we wanted to figure out, like, where do we fit in the network of food sovereignty, like within all these organizations, these other amazing organizations out there doing this kind of work, what is our role and how do we like really narrow in and focus on that? And so education has been the thing that people seem to be, to look to us for. So we don't really provide produce for restaurants, but occasionally we do have an overabundance of food, and we have partnered up with some organizations that are located around the country, but some are located in New York City, and they'll drive up and they'll pick up our food and they'll bring it to restaurants. They'll bring it to restaurants, they'll bring it to food banks, they'll bring it to, churches, but primarily our food goes toward our 25 members. It's no cost, so we, give food for free to 25 families. And then we have 3 institutions. So like a refugee center. There's actually a new Black-owned grocery store opening up in the south end of Albany, which is where Soulfire Farm was dreamed up by Leah and Jonah. So we're gonna add that person to our institutional shares. So hopefully, maybe some people who are chefs in Albany will pick up some of the produce from him and, be able to bring it to their restaurants.
When you mentioned, that's amazing, first of all, but when you mentioned that somebody's coming to your farm to getting your extra produce and taking it to other places, is that happening? Like, how are they affording to do that? Is there grants for that? Or are they getting paid, or is that a voluntary thing that's happening?
Yeah, so there's an organization that, which I can't remember the name of it right now, but I will add it in the chat as soon as I do remember it. And they get grants. They get grant funding for that. And I think right now they're located mostly in New York City, but they're starting to expand across the country. And then they get volunteers to pick up the food and drop it off wherever they're planning on dropping it off.
That's great. I just wanted to make sure somebody was getting paid for that.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So in the context of all of that then, so you've talked about the education piece there, and there is a huge amount of education still, I think, for both the chef community and for the consumer piece, right? So could you let's speak to that. Like, how can we as consumers and users and purveyors, how can we support Black farming? Like, what do we need? And also JBF, like, how can institutions like James Beard be more supportive of the work that organizations like yourself are doing? And how can we fill in any gaps in the narrative potentially that you feel are missing? Or is that even our place? Should we just send them to you?
That's a good question. One of the things we like to tell people too is, like, we don't want to become the only place that people look for this kind of work. There are so many incredible organizations out there doing this work, and I wanted to mention a few of them. The Black Food and Justice Alliance is incredible. There are a collection of organizations that, are aimed at reversing Black land loss, preventing food apartheid in Black communities, promoting the work of Black farmers. So that's someone, to really look to, who has a huge abundance of resources that can say, here are these places across the country that are doing this kind of work. The National Black Farmers Association, same kind of thing. They focus on land retention, access to public and private loans, rural economic development for African-American farmers. They serve like tens of thousands of members. And Brooke, I see in the chat, it's the BFJA, so the Black Food and Justice Alliance. And then there's also the Black Church Food Security Network that helps people open up little community gardens or farms on Black church or Black-owned church property. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say, to bring in, to find space for people to actually grow food in their communities. So to bring that fresh food into the communities. The Southeastern African American Farmers Organic Network, SAAFON, SAAFON. They're also doing incredible work. So there's all these organizations out there that are doing these things. And so supporting them is obviously one way to do that, is one way to push the whole movement as a whole forward, rather than, you know, people love to be like soul fire, and we love that. Like, yes, we want to teach people, we want people to come here. We're so grateful to be a part of this, and we know our sister networks are just as incredible, and in some cases can offer a lot more than we can because of where our focus is.
I want to appreciate you for shouting out all those organizations, because the list of people that we wanted to have on this panel and organize was very big. It was really hard to choose to make it a small conversation. Shenarri, what's your thoughts on this? Like, what is what do you think people in New York who are coming to restaurants in New York, do you think that diners have a sufficient understanding of many, like, of all parts of this, even like the cost of getting those ingredients to the place? Like, how do we get an audience, the Black community and beyond, more engaged on this topic and more supportive of Black farming and Black farming associations, many of whom Brooke. I'm getting confused with the chat. There's the chat names coming up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that, you know, one way that we could definitely get the consumer a bit more excited and involved in this process is that, you know, for instance, if I were to purchase from like a local Black-owned farmer and all of my produce is coming from them, why not highlight that on your menu? You know, like we put all of these things like, oh, like our wine is from South Africa, or like everything's soy free, or like whatever it may be. I think that's the prime opportunity to highlight these farmers or where your produce is coming as well. You know, when you go to a lot of restaurants with fish, you know, there's market price fish or like catch of the day, or, you know, there's always like some type of highlight, and you'll see that price jump from when you're getting fish from your local supermarket and the salmon's, I don't know, like $9 or something. But if you go out to eat and it's getting and you're getting the salmon from like a wild salmon farm or something like that, and it can go up to $30 or $50, or I don't know, whatever the market is. But like that's a prime example, you know, just for us to take advantage of that opportunity as well, as chefs and restaurateurs and owners. There's a bug in my face. As chefs and this bug, sorry. That's like prime opportunity to highlight where we're getting our produce from as well. And I think it's really important for it to start within Black restaurants, you know, just like kind of set that example. And I know there's like a lot of issues sometimes as far as like what produce is available, or like if we're using specialty things, or like the bulk items and things like that. So I think that's where it gets a little bit tricky when there's like the chef to farmer relationship. But I think a great place to start is some of these smaller owned restaurants, like a place like me, Cadence. You know, I have a smaller restaurant, so I don't necessarily order as much stuff as people would think, or as a place that would have like 300 diners per night. Like I'm not doing that many covers. I only have 12 seats in Cadence. But, you know, I think that's like prime time to take advantage of the opportunity.
Absolutely. And like, have you ever considered, and I'm saying this because this is something that I've considered, right? But so I'm assuming possibly that you have. But have you ever considered, like, so right now I've, for example, have a couple of farms growing produce for me, so that when the world gets a bit more regular and I can return to in-person dining events and stuff like that, it's like, okay, you know, I'm going to go to this farm and they've grown this okra for me, and I'm going to go to this farm and they've grown this product for me. Like, have you had any of those conversations yet? I mean, would that be something that you'd be keen to like start having? And how could we facilitate more of that? You know, like Carter's Farms in, I think he's in North Virginia, is it? And you know, there's places around New York State, right?
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of
what's the barrier in having those relationships directly with farms and being like, is it just cost?
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily cost, because I think in the end, like, it's an investment worth, investing into. You know where your produce is coming from, you know who's growing it, you're able to support another Black person. Like, I don't think, cost should really be the case here. There's other ways we can, factor that in within a restaurant. I think we all know that. But I've had a few conversations with a few local farmers, and I have somebody I'm in the works with getting all of my microgreens from a young lady. She has her own microgreens company. Great, awesome, I'll take it. There's another farmer. I can't.
Gonna say, is that OK Farms?
She may. I don't
'Cause
know. I
uses-
think she's a
'cause
young lady. I think she's in her 20s, mid-20s.
Oh, no, my girl's a little bit older than that.
Okay. But I've had like a few conversations with like a few local farmers, and it was either things weren't in season that I was trying to get. So maybe it was me as a chef doing things backwards, or there wasn't enough of what I was trying to get. So I think that's been like the issue. And I was having those conversations in the summertime and like late fall. But as I said, the business is kind of like up and going a bit more now. People are dining out more. COVID cases are kind of dropping. So I think people feel a bit more comfortable being in the restaurant space. So it's definitely a conversation worth revisiting.
On the subject of not enough, and I feel you and I hear you, because when you're running a restaurant, you just want to have the right number of the thing, right? But what
Right.
if, as chefs, we were like, okay, I've only got 10 of this thing, and I'm going to price it that way. Like, instead of, like resetting people's minds as to what's available and why and how, and like sustainability is, you brought up, is a really important question, but maybe we shouldn't expect to be able to pop off 80 covers of one particular plant, or do you know what I mean? Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a bit of a digression potentially.
Yeah.
What
I
do
would
you
love to have a space where I could do that.
Good, you've got the space, get it done.
I can't imagine like people coming here and I have like 10 fried lasagnas for the week. Like, people would kill me.
But your place would be full, there'd be a queue, right? Because everyone would be chasing
Yes.
that thing. Okay, so what do we think the future of Black foodways looks like? That's quite a big question, but let's think about it in not in a national level necessarily, but in like a local level, seeing as we're all seemingly at this point from a New York perspective. So what does that look like? The future of Black foodways, what does that look like? Like, what comes to mind when that pops into your head? Because the concept of Black food, there's a lot out there right now about what that is, right? It's the link with West Africa or Africa in general. It's the link with the South. It's this return to ancestral foodways and food ingredients, indigenous ingredients. With all of that in context in the background, so what is the future of Black food?
I think for me, like how I foresee the future of Black food, it's more farm to table. It's more fresh. It's more available as well. We're getting things in bulk. We know where things are coming from. Like, we understand the soil, we understand the farms. And, it's not just like, even as a chef, it's not just logging online to the website, clicking these things. Like, no, actually go visit the farm to see how things operate and see if there are other things around the farm that maybe you didn't think of before, but you can put these things to use to really take advantage of, all the different produce and fruits and vegetables and seeds and nuts and all kind of things that you can get from this one place versus branching out to multiple vendors. And I think also having that relationship with the farmer, like asking your chefs or your clientele, what do you need? Maybe if I needed Granny Smith apples, but you're only making Fuji apples or something like that, maybe that's something that they would start making if there's a need for it. So I think really, sitting down, having those conversations as a chef and a farmer, figuring out what your clients need or what your farmer has. Like, I think that's a great place to start the conversation, and then kind of build your brand around that versus building your brand and then looking for these holes and places and pockets to fill people in. But if you go into it with the vision, oh, I'm going to have like a farm to table restaurant. I want 90% of my produce to come from like a Black owned farm. What kind of menu can I create around that? But I think a lot of chefs do it the other way around. I'm going to get into this restaurant, I'm going to make a menu, and I'm going to see where I can find all of my produce.
I'm in the first camp, just FYI. And Brooke, do you mind commenting? Oh, actually, what I might just quickly interject with for Shinari here is Chef's Boot Camp is a program that Beard rolls out, right? I'm sure you've heard of it. Like, is that part of the solution? Do we just need to have more of that type of activity where chefs are placed in situations or on farms directly so that they can, because, you know, a lot of chefs are going to come through the culinary school, right? And they're going to do their stages and they're going to, then they're in a kitchen and they open their restaurant and they might not have that tactile relationship with farm and land, right? So is that something perhaps we should think about, like baking into culinary training and culinary courses? It's like that time spent. Well, actually, I'm going to ask Brooke that. What do you think, Brooke?
You know, for us, the future of Black foodways always boils down to getting land and getting Black people farming, because someone actually just mentioned in the comment, you know, 1.3% of farmers are Black. So there aren't a lot of farms and farmers to choose from at this point. And I think, you know, the ways to do that is to like find ways to redistribute land. We work with a land trust called NEFOC, Northeastern Farmers of Color. And there's a reparations map where there are Black and brown folks who are looking to open up food operations and agricultural ventures who really just like need land and resources. So people can go on there on the reparations map, look for farms and organizations in their area and choose to donate land. They can donate money, they can donate, you know, tools, tractors, you know, whatever the case may be, whatever the people need. And then, you know, I also think a lot about like community gardens. There are a lot of community gardens in New York City. And even though they're not farms, there are, I think, opportunities, you know, to go to these community gardens, because some of them, you can grow a lot of food in a very small amount of space. You know, if there was a community garden that was just like, I'm the collard green garden, you know, that is me. You can get a lot of greens from a small little space, you know, and that would be an opportunity too, to like show these people who are engaging in community gardens and farming and gardening for the first time, these Black and brown folks, that what they're doing has purpose. You know, it's like, grow these, and these collard greens are in Cadence, you know, and in this beautiful restaurant with this beautiful Black chef, like this is what it is, you know, that's so exciting. And so that's something we do a lot too, you know, is like we bring the farm, we bring the gardens to the communities, because sometimes, you know, you're not going to get folks in the middle of the city who grew up in the city to come stomp around in the mud with us. Like for some people that's uncomfortable. So those community gardens, I think, can be really like, there's so much potential in them to lead to more and to bigger ventures.
Love it. And I definitely agree. And yes, on the subject, which is a big one, of the lack of land for Black people to acquire, and the lack of, I mean, I was hoping Cornelius was going to be here to speak in depth on this, but I wonder if either of you, like, what do you know about the American Rescue Plan Act, and how that is having an effect on like land ownership and Black people owning land? Do either of you know much about that?
I don't know much about it, but I'm here to learn.
You know what? I'm here to learn as well. I didn't know a whole lot about it either. And Cornelius is leaving us hanging. What a brother. All right, so I'm not going to get into it because I don't know enough about it and I don't want to talk shit, honestly. So let's go back to this idea, because what I'm enjoying about this conversation is there are lots of small solutions when it comes to at least bridging gaps between the farms we know exist and the community gardens and the potential for chefs and consumers to be able to access that and use that. I'm just wondering if there's this extra piece where, I mean, it seems obvious, right, that to grow your own food and to keep it sustainable, like keeping it seasonal, all of these things strike me as obviously sustainable. How do we build restaurant models? And this might be a little bit repetitive, and I'm sorry if it is, but I'm just very, very keen to know because I want to do this. How do we build restaurant models that can scale in this type of way, but in this way where it's very much, you know, this farm to table idea, and this idea that, like, when it's gone, it's gone. Like, we're not growing on mass produced scales to feed hundreds of people. We're growing to feed an audience of 12 every night at Cadence, or an audience of 12 every night at Sankofa, or wherever it is, or 24. Like, where is the piece there in educating the chef? And is it possible, do you think, to scale that way? Because of course, we know, like, the industrial land complex, right, industrial farming, it's all about more. That's what it's about. It's not about less. So how do we get the whole system to think, to turn it upside down, in the same way that we've kind of had to, like, reimagine hospitality since the pandemic, right? The pyramid's been inverted a little bit. How do we do that with agriculture and farming and menus? How do we get people there? Is that education at culinary school, or is it education from organizations like James Beard, or is it just the doing? Is it other chefs like you doing it and getting the press and getting it out there?
I think there's a couple of different ways that you can go about it. You know, speaking on my culinary school experience, I went to Institute of Culinary Education. I didn't go to any farm. Like, I've actually never stepped foot on a farm. But, you know, now that I'm in, well, I've been on a farm, but not as a chef looking for produce, like, if that makes sense. But I've been to a farm before. But I think that's something I really could have benefited from being in culinary school if I actually went to a farm and, you know, I would see things growing, and then I would see it go from literally farm to table. And maybe we had like a class or a session on asparagus one day or something like that, so that I could see the different ways of like how my food gets to the plate. I think with programs like the James Beard Boot Camp for chefs, or any other programs that kind of focusing on the chef and farmer relationship, that's like a great opportunity that's also a great opportunity to just kind of segue and combine those two worlds together too. I think, you know, there's a lot of chefs that we don't visit farms. We just don't. And it's not that we don't want to, it's just, you know, I don't think people are thinking about it. I don't think it's really something that's heavily promoted in our worlds a lot of times. But I do like when farmers will come up to me in Cadence, or farmers will hit me up in my DMs like, hey, I'm selling this, I'm selling that, or like, I have this farm. Like, that's how I actually get the information on some of the local farmers here in New York, because I'm also not from here. That's something that people have to think of as well. You know, people just assume, oh, you have a restaurant in New York, you should know all the farmers here in New York. That's not necessarily the case. You know, a lot of people that live here in New York aren't from here. So, you know, it's important for us as chefs to reach out, but I think it's also just as important for the farmers to make themselves visible for us as well, because otherwise we just won't know, you know?
Yeah, I hear you there. Maybe we need some kind of event, like a conference or summit, that brings all of this together nationwide. You know, it's like Black chefs, Black farmers have a conversation together, start planning this properly, you know?
Yeah, that would be great.
Dope, right? I don't think James Beard can afford to put that on. What are your thoughts, Brooke?
Yeah. I think starting at culinary school, prior to coming to LA, to the East Coast, excuse me, I'm from LA, and I ran 2 food businesses out in LA. And so a lot of the produce that we got it came from farms, but it came from massive, gigantic farms. And I think, having some time in culinary school where you really focus on farm to table would be an excellent idea. And we're actually considering, not sure yet, of having a culinary program like that here. Not like culinary school, you don't get certificates, but similar to our farming immersions, having folks come who want to be chefs, they'll, literally walk out into the rows, pick some stuff, and we'll cook it and find ways to just bridge that gap. Like, how do we just live seasonally? Since moving to the farm, I eat way more seasonally than I ever did. Because once you develop that relationship with the fresh food, you don't want to go to the store and buy a bell pepper in January because it's not, it's not fresh. It's not bell pepper season, and I feel that way now. And I think that's a wonderful place to be because we're literally starting to move with the cycles of life and the way it's supposed to be, the way that it used to be. And I think also helping people remember that this is natural, Black people farming, being connected to their food and what they grow is natural. It's what was, prior to all the trauma that we experienced here in the Americas, that's what it was. And I think the closer we get to that, the more easily it'll translate. And I'm going to add a few things into the chat, but we also have a list of 326 some odd organizations and farm operations across the country that we've just accumulated over time. So I'll add that link in the chat as well. So, if depending on where you're located, maybe you can find some farms near you. And I don't know, Shenarri, if you know of Rise and Root Farm, Karen Washington helped co-found, but they're located in upstate New York, and they come down to the farmers markets, I think on Fridays or something like that. So you might want to check in with them because Karen Washington is OG.
She is OG. I wanted her for this panel.
Yeah. I bet. Yeah.
No shade, Karen. I know you're a busy woman. Okay, so I think we've done quite a lot. Yeah, I think we've talked a good deal about how important it is to have this relationship, right? Okay, I reckon I'm ready to, do we feel ready to open this up to the audience for questions?
I think so.
Anna,
Let's get in there.
How are we going to do the Q&A? I can see some people making great comments in the chat, but I believe there is a question box somewhere that I can't see, but hopefully Anna can.
I can read out the first here I see in the Q&A from Brooke Sinclair. If your local grocer had a category of fruits and veggies grown on Black-owned farms, how much more would you be willing to pay? $1 more or less? And then also from Brooke, there are less than 50K Black-owned farms left in America. Zoe, do you think that the James Beard Foundation would sponsor a sustainable supply chain dedicated to distributing Black-owned farms?
Wow. I love your vision. There are less than 50,000 Black-owned farms left in America, which is a tragedy, I agree. Do you think James Beard Foundation will sponsor a sustainable supply chain? I mean, I'm going to be honest, and this is with no shade to the foundation, but that's not part of what the foundation currently models. So this would be sort of outside the, I think it would be outside the realm of what James Beard considers as its purview, which is very much rooted in the front facing of hospitality. Does that make sense? I wish that we could finance something like this, but I feel like this is, I feel like that is such a beautiful idea, but I feel like what you want there is somebody you need somebody who's very, I don't want to name specific organizations because I'm wearing my James Beard hat, so I have to be careful. But there are, let's say, a lot of moneyed organizations who should feel guilty about what they've been doing to the land and the soil over years in terms of mass production and deforestation and, moving communities out of where they belong in the name of such mass production. So there is there are big companies who should sponsor that activity for sure. And maybe it's a case of, or honestly, government. I really wish Cornelius was here, but there's a lot in policy that should be shifted around all of this, because there's a lot of reparations still outstanding. There's a lot of infrastructure still needed. There's a lot of literal, supply chain and land management required. So, a lot of that has to be from a systemic place, right? Because there's so many parts in the chain when we talk about supply chain. So in a way, there has to be this combination of policy and big money coming together. Like, that's what I think. But I don't know that that's within the purview of James Beard Foundation. But having said that, maybe I will speak to Alexina Cather, who is the Policy and Advocacy Director, and maybe she has some ideas about what James Beard may be able to do in support of a cause like that. That was very long.
Yeah.
Diplomatic answer.
I'm gonna go to the next question here. Thank you, Zoe. Just from the chat box, from Matt earlier, they asked, what logical and distribution challenges do you all face? So Shenarri and Brooke, I'll direct that for you guys.
You're on mute, babe.
Sorry. Oh, was I on mute that whole time? Oh my.
Let me just start over. Sorry, I was on mute. I think for me, like the biggest issue with like vendors distribution is that, a lot of times things aren't in stock. The quantity size, either way too big or way too small. That's like another issue that I have. And then, I think that's it. Because like I said, I'm willing to pay more to support a local Black-owned farm versus like getting all my stuff from Baldor, personally. So those are like the main issues that I face, things being in stock and then like the quantity. But for the most part, the quality is usually, you can't beat it.
Yeah, and I don't think I have anything to add to that, since we don't really supply restaurants at this time. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay, thank you. I see another question here in our Q&A box. Ash asked, what does help look like from other POC allies, specifically folks who are not farmers or not chefs?
Allies. I think one way one way people could definitely help out, having these conversations like this, where we're connecting, the chefs and the farmers, and we're just building those relationships, even if you're not necessarily a chef or you're not in the industry, but a friend that has a restaurant, or a friend that has like their own microgreen company or something like that. I think just, being at the table, having these conversations a bit more, us networking within our Black hospitality community is something that's really great. And getting other people thinking the same way, I think we all have a friend that's either in the bar industry or someone that's working in a restaurant. Pick their brains. Hey, where are you getting your food from? Is it local? Is it seasonal? Like, is it organic? Like, is this something that you would be interested in? So I think, just having those conversations with people just to get the conversation started.
Yeah.
If I may add to that. Oh, sorry.
No, you go
Go ahead, Brooke. Go ahead, Brooke.
Okay. No, I would definitely agree with that. I think that's the education piece, versing yourself on these kinds of things, heading to some of those resources. There's also a couple of resources that are specific for creating opportunities for Black folks in culinary industries and beverage industries. So I'll add those to the chat too. And having the conversations yeah, just bringing it to people's attention of its importance.
I was just going to add, like, what does allyship look like, full stop, right? It's about, it's that really, it's about supporting in a literal way, right? So going there, buying with pounds, but not everybody has money to spend. And also not everybody's going to be able to afford that extra pound for that specially selected organic Black-owned farm thing. So there's a different education piece that has to happen for some consumers, because we can't have, rich Black people living off the land. It's kind of, that doesn't work. So we need to have access for everybody. But and there's other ways, like restaurants, Cadence. I can see people in the chat already saying they want to send you produce. You could be doing brand collabs together. You could actually do campaigns together where you're talking about this particular pulse or grain or varietal as well, like getting people educated about varieties of ingredients, instead of like, I'm so over everybody buying Hass avocados, which isn't, there's so many varieties of avocado. And they might have to soon because Mexico's been stopped. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's there's lots of different ways to support in all kinds of allyship. Anna, I don't know if you've seen this in the chat, but it says, how do we educate consumers, patrons on seasonality and sustainable agriculture as it pertains to their dining experience, so that proper expectations are set when they enter the restaurant? That's quite a broad question, but to me, it sparks up ideas of when food is grown for how it looks, and then food that doesn't look good to be sold on shelves is like dashed and binned, basically. So we get a hell of a ton of food waste out of great ingredients that just look a bit, well, natural. They just look how they were grown, So I wonder if either of you also have any comments about that, like the diner's expectations around what organic food looks like and should cost, and how you might highlight that on menus potentially or other things.
I think as a chef, no one should be putting out food that doesn't look good. Like regardless of what you're making, it just needs to look good.
I just mean, like, you can get carrots that have like streaks of purple. For some people that's really attractive. For other people, they're like, my carrot's supposed to be orange and it's supposed to be fat, it's supposed to be long. And if it doesn't look like that, it's not a carrot. Do you know what I'm saying? But the truth is, in the natural environment, carrots are going to look all kinds of beautiful ways. But that's the question. What is beauty? And how do you redefine that for the diner? Obviously, you can make it look beautiful through the process of cooking. That's the art. But
I think like, diners should, I think at this point in like the food world, people should have like some sort of expectations before they walk into a restaurant. We have social media, people look at pictures and the menus before they come in, right? Like most people go into a restaurant, they already know what they want. I think, ways to kind of like highlight certain things on your menu. You should be doing the same thing as a chef. If you have like something that's seasonal or something, or if you have like pink carrots or something that's like maybe not in the norm for most people, definitely highlight those things, make a special out of it, throw it up on your Instagram, like, hey, we're doing pink carrots this week, come and get it. Or, I think, definitely just take advantage of what the consumers spend their time doing as well. If everybody's on Instagram looking at food and researching things, and on the internet, XYZ, do the same thing. And I think that brings them in a bit more. And then also just going back to highlighting things on your menu as well. This is seasonal, or like this is organic, this is from this farm, or like this is only in season for a week, but we have this special running for this entire week. Just kind of getting people thinking outside the box and eating outside of like their normal circle. I think that's something, a lot of chefs and restaurateurs should kind of strive for. Like, we don't want to eat, there's a lot of traditional things out here that people eat. We were talking about collard greens earlier, so I'll say that, like, people eat collard greens, but if they come to my restaurant, they'll see a collard green wrap, and it may be a little intimidating because we're used to eating collard greens that have been like stewed and cooked for hours, but they see collard greens and their mind is like, huh, it's not stew. Like maybe this is something I want to try. Like this is like a different approach to this vegetable. So I think, have fun with it, but be very engaging with your clientele as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it. I happen to know as well that people charge, heritage or heirloom, which is just organic and normal stuff. People charge like 5 times X on a menu for that,
Yeah.
Anyway, so this woman, Larissa, because we're closing, I just want to get Larissa's question. She's been very active in the chat. She's shared a lot of information and she wants to connect with both of you. So she says, I can't submit my question in the Q&A. Sorry, Larissa. Getting in on the ground level is hard to navigate as someone who is interested in land back and food sovereignty, but comes from digital marketing media background. She has a community garden plot. She started volunteering at her local community garden, tick, tick, tick. I applied to the Soulfire Farm apprenticeship, but how do you just actually get started? How do you shift a passion to a purpose-based opportunities and sustainable agriculture if you're not close to that work at all or never worked with orgs? So basically the question is, how do you begin? My short answer would be to begin, but I'll hand it over to the professionals. So Brooke, what do you make of that?
Yeah, Larissa, I'm curious to know what you mean by begin. Are you saying you would like to open up your own operation, or I'm curious about that. I think, I recognize your name too, and I'm curious if I've come across some of your stuff or your applications before. Begin in terms of professionally get involved in a deeper way. Well, I think do you have Farming While Black? It's Leah Penniman's book. It's an excellent resource. It kind of, I figured it did. But it helps lead you through kind of those steps. And I think also there are a lot of organizations out there that have like volunteer opportunities to actually come to the farm. There are also organizations who need media marketing help, so digital marketing help. Some farmers are not good at the media back end stuff, and I'm sure could really utilize your skill set. We actually have a volunteer program that's like a specialized skill volunteer where, we utilize a lot of interns for some of our back end stuff. So reaching out to farms and asking for ways that you can help, that are a little unconventional, I suppose, could be a way to go about it. Getting involved in, I think there's a lot of people that would probably really benefit from your expertise. So I think that's a good way to go about it. And if you want to open up your own spot, utilizing some of the resources that we have on the website, I think can be helpful. And then Farming While Black can be helpful as well. And and just to do it, put your head down and try,
I think you're doing it, Larissa. You've got to put yourself in the community and you've got to put yourself in the conversation. You've got to be in the mix. That's how you learn, that's how you grow, and just get in the network of other people who are like-minded doing the same things as you, and that would be invaluable. I have a great question from Brooke Sinclair but we're about to wrap, and also I can't answer it.
What's the question?
But shall I read it out? Do we have time, Anna?
If we do this one very, I just don't want to keep everyone, but I know we started a couple of minutes late, so we'll hold up here. We'll hold up here.
The question is, with the 4 billion USDA owes Black farmers, what are you doing? I wonder who the you is there. What are you doing to help or draw attention to this? Me personally, James Beard. Clearly this is a policy question, and Alexina Cather would be better positioned to answer that. But my short answer on it would be that, again, this is like, excuse me. Again, Cornelius's absence is felt, and it's policy, right? It's lobbying, it's getting enough. There's just enough. I don't think there's enough understanding generally around these issues. I don't think people know these issues exist necessarily en masse. I think there could be a lot more done in the media to highlight these issues, to highlight some of the stuff that Cornelia is doing. And I know we try to support that stuff through the industry support and things like that, but it's really a question of, yeah, lobbying and getting influence in Capitol Hill and getting influence with local governance and state governance and persistent pressure to make changes, which isn't just the job of any one person or organization. Honestly, it can only happen en masse and collectively if everybody gets on the same page and shares their resources, you know, much like Soulfire Farm are doing. They're openly collaborating and sharing the resources out there, right? But if we could find a way to get everybody to back a policy change together and use that momentum together en masse, and plus some extra education around the issues generally in the consumer and hospitality sphere and the food system generally. I think people forget that unless you're in this, like why do people know about it unless you're in it, unless you're in the work? You know, there's nobody shouting about it necessarily. I don't know. What do you think, Shenarri and the other Brooke? Brooke too.
Yeah, I think you know, the most important thing that we all can do is sharing, making these things like known, like the awareness of it. I think that's like the first step in it, because like you said, a lot of people just don't know. You know, there's a lot of things that I don't know, and I'm sure there's like a lot of things that Brooke may not necessarily know, or Zoe, or like, you know, but that's why we have these conversations, and that's why we do these panels, to bring all of this information together. And now everyone in this chat and everyone on this panel is now aware. So, you know, there's no excuse, because now we know, and it's up to us as individuals to do something about it. So I think, you know, just sharing this information on, you know, whatever platform or whatever space that you have is something that's like really important and beneficial for all of us.
Yeah, and I'll add too, we also run uprooting racism trainings for individuals and organizations. So whether or not your organization or the organization that you work for, or you are involved in food justice at all, these trainings offer your information about the history of racism within the food system, but then they also offer opportunities for you and your organization to examine, you know, our own roles and of complicity and resistance to the system. So this is they're really excellent, and people come out of there like, oh my God, I had no idea that this was happening. And so I think there's opportunities, you know, like James Beard could bring some of your folks into the, or sign up as an institution, and, you know, bring some of your internal people to the keep saying organization, but to the training, so that, you know, the information is just spreading, you know, because I think,
Yeah.
and in really realistic ways, like this is the reality, you know, can be scary. This is the history. This is how it is. And now we all know. So how do we move forward? And then I think that'll broaden out to actual policy change, because Zoe, like you were saying, if we don't all know, if we're not all on the same page, then it's not going to ever get there. And so that's why we do a lot of grassroots stuff, like individual people, organizational focus, because it starts there and then it'll trickle out. That's the hope. That's the goal.
So much. I did want to close out here. I think we had a beautiful conversation. Thank you to our panelists for joining us, and everyone for their questions, and lots of comments in here. I love how active the chat was. But I did want to be able to also, even though we miss Cornelius, if you would like to check out the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund, they do lots of policy work. Cornelius was also is at a very high level in all of this, and that's a great resource to learn more and tap into. So I'm going to just put here my slides to where you can find everyone after this. And I did put my email in the chat. Would love to hear everyone's thoughts or any other questions on everything we've discussed tonight. And hopefully we can get something else together and continue this conversation. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. Zoe, do you have any closing remarks, Brooke or Shenarri?
I do.
I just wanted to say thank you. Thanks for having me. This is a very great, engaging conversation. I hope you all come to my restaurant whenever you get a chance. No pressure. And farmers, if you're here, please let's connect. I put my email in the chat. You could find me. I'm kind of everywhere, but I am looking for local Black-owned farms to support. So if you know any, please hit me up, email me. Let's get it started for the spring.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, I'd like to also share thanks to the participants on the panel and say, I'm just putting it out there that I would be very willing to do and desirous. I would love to do an event with you where we can talk about this and highlight these issues. And also I want everyone to just look out for another upcoming conversation along similar lines in March, where we're going to be talking about women pioneers in food and agriculture, where we'll be doing more of this. Thank you. And thank you, Brooke and Shenarri, for being excellent contributors to this panel. You really made it come alive. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for
Thanks,
having me.
guys.
I'm glad I was able
Thank
to
you.
contribute.
I got to go back to the restaurant, but I'm going to peace out. Thank you, guys. Have a great
Bye.
evening.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.